All right, hey guys, good evening. Good to see everybody. Apologies for the delay. I forgot my earphones, so I had like no mic capabilities, and obviously I use the Mac to do it, but I had no outputs. You know how it goes when it comes to this world. Your setup gets a little bit crazy, but I'm able to make it work tonight, so it's great. Yeah, I know you got the nice mic there, James. Yeah, everything is in my other classroom. So my bare minimums, I left my bare minimum. I left my travel kit in the classroom. So such is life, right? Okay, well, good to see everyone this evening. Hopefully you guys had a good weekend. And everything is going well, and that you're doing really, really good. Definitely a few things going on this evening. So let's kind of take a moment to jump right into it, because I want to make sure that we're maximizing our time, okay? But a couple of quick announcements before anything. Like I was saying, November 11th is going to be the due date to drop classes and have it incomplete, where it does not withdraw, where it does not impact GPA. So please make sure you take a moment to, if you're considering to do that before the 11th. That's kind of like the point of no return. After that, whatever grade is left is pretty much left to you. And it's going to be based off your accumulating grade in the class, okay? So if you're watching the recording, that would be one more day. So the 11th is your due date, okay? So 2 days for us, because obviously we're live tonight. If you're catching it on the next day or tomorrow, then you obviously have one more day for that. So just want to throw that out there, okay? So just to keep that in mind, everyone's doing really well. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 students out there that are questionable on the recovery side of things. So if you have questions, issues, or concerns, please email me, make an appointment with me, talk to me during break or even after tonight, but get in touch with me however way possible so that we can talk about your options and how we can bring up your grade, because I do accept late work. So as long as you put in the time, you should be good, okay? So big thumbs up there. The second thing I also want to bring up is that we have a job opportunity floating in the Rio community, and I'll share that with you guys. So every now and again, we get email announcements, and one popped up on the radar through the marketing department. I do not know the folks in marketing, but I can make my way and find out. On there? Oh, Ruthie. Okay. So I didn't know Ruthie needed a graphic artist. Okay, I do know Ruthie. So there's a major hookup there as a possibility, but it's a graphic artist. It's a part-time opportunity. It's pretty much for 12 months, right? So that does include summers. And it looks like the monthly salary range is somewhere between like $2,400 a month to $3,000 a month. And it is on campus, so if you're comfortable being on campus, definitely be aware of that. And it's only a 10-day window to apply, which means it started yesterday and it ends next week for that window, okay? Some of the things that are thrown out there in terms of like basic function, it's basically layout work, pictorial graphic forms, art media techniques, basically just a variety of different materials. And some of the duties are indicated here. Produces artwork for things like books, pamphlets, handbooks, brochures, slides, overheads, print, electronic ads, charts, graphs, posters, teaching guides, certificates, special e-forms, pretty much everything that's digital up to this point. And looking at things like preparing photographs for print, mounting, laminating, retouching, cropping, scanning, and knowledge of pretty much the modern techniques and materials of graphic arts. So Work Express, that's a really old program. That's InDesign. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, then you're somewhat familiar with InDesign. Illustrator, Photoshop, freehand typography. So we're taking that right now. Principles of color and design theory. So principles of design, we talked about that. Color is literally a 1 hour, 30-minute course. Requirements, pre-press, printing, principles of marketing, public relations, World Wide Web. So it's pretty general, I would say. And it's out there for you guys to grab. Now, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I qualify for this, the interview process would still be very, very beneficial. I think give it a shot. And if we get as far as like an interview, that's still good practice generally, right? So, and even just signing up and applying, I think would be really cool too. So definitely to consider it, okay? You have to complete an online application, and that includes resume and some samples of work. So hint, hint, we're working on portfolios right now. So we could definitely early launch that for you. I can share the template early if you're very interested. And you could send a paper or print out a version as well. So this is great. I think this is a good opportunity for you guys, and just to go through the application process. So let me go ahead and post that in the chat, so that way you can at least take advantage of that. And I'll put it here under the chat so you can click onto it. But definitely consider it, check it out. I think it's a great opportunity. And if you're very serious, then we could talk one-on-one, and we could take a look at some of the details and everything of that sort, and just talk about it. One last thing too, I just realized, is that there are supplemental questions, which is basically like kind of like an open response question. 3 of them about how do you stay current with design trends? What are the steps towards your creative process? I'm looking at the supplemental questions right here in the center of the screen. What are the steps of your creative process as a designer? We've already talked about that with principles of design, okay? And what design programs are you most comfortable with? And obviously we're working in one of them, so that's there. So these are some really great, pretty general, pretty broad questions. This is a good entry-level job for 20 hours a week. So that works really well with scheduling. So part-time, you can still go to school, work part-time on campus. I mean, this is a win-win situation for anybody that's being a student at Rio and getting paid, okay? So take into consideration, just throwing it out there. You know me, I'm always about trying to bring opportunities to you guys. So take that into consideration, okay? So when I saw this, I mentioned it to Professor Gordos, and he's like, what do you think about offering this to our students just to try it out? He gave me a thumbs up, go for it. So think about that, and then that'll be a great opportunity, okay? And if you're super serious about it, then I might be able to put in a word for you guys as a referral, and maybe even write a letter of recommendation as well, okay? So let's see where we can go with it, and follow up with me, and we'll talk more about it, okay? All right, cool. If that makes sense, you can give me a thumbs up emoji, and we'll get it rocking and rolling from there, okay? All right, guys. So so take advantage of every opportunity. You just never know. You never know. So even if you think you might not, try anyway. Okay. And then hopefully one day or before class, I'll share my Disney story as well, because that was like, I didn't think I was going to get it, but I ended up getting it. So it was an interesting story how that all kind of unfolded, and how I beat like the Art Center grad, because it was me against an Art Center graduate, and I got the job. So I was like, okay. So dreams do come true when you're working for Disney. All right, but enough about me. Let's talk about the current project. Okay, hopefully you guys had an opportunity to think about it over the weekend, maybe watch it a few more times, okay? But let's just kind of circle back around with what the objective of the project is going to be, because it's going to move a little bit faster. So tonight's objective is basically to design a minimalist poster for one film. Not one for every 3, just one for one film. 3 different films, you pick one, and you design a poster for the one, okay? And that's 97% SOAR or Chicano. And you're using your principles of design, right? So focal point, contrast, scale and proportion, variety, harmony, right? Asymmetrical balance. You're actually now going to create that in your design. And if you want to add other principles, right? Some a little bit of an abstraction, surrealism. Feel free to add that too as well, because in my opinion, if it's slightly abstract, it creates a higher level of interest for the viewer. Okay. And at the end of the day, we're trying to sell this project, right? So you're selling the movie, you're advertising, you're marketing this film. Get it? So if you're like, oh, I don't know if I should get that job or I should sign up for Rio, after this week, you will have the skills to apply for that job. So you're marketing a product, you're marketing a film, okay? You're marketing an idea, okay? And that's at the heart of it, guys. The big takeaway for this project, the idea tonight, is how to think, how to make. So we just want to look at how to think, how to make, okay? So I'm going to walk you through that process. I'm going to walk you through the how to think and how to make, okay? And so just as a quick review from last week, we were saying that less is more, right? Say more with less. So we're trying to limit the graphics ever more and more, and we're constraining your graphics to the bare minimum, practically, to talk about a story. Okay, so if I was just watching this movie over the weekend, my wife wanted to watch Back to the Future. She had an urge to watch it, so I sat with her and I watched it, and I thought, oh, cool, like obviously they're selling the story with a famous person, but what if no one ever knew who Michael J. Fox was? What if he wasn't globally known? Another way to tell a story with art elements is something like the image on the right, where you're kind of like hinting, even though I know that's the part 2 versus the part 1, I totally get it. But that's an idea, right? Like, how do you tell the story through symbols and through symbolism? And so there's 2 very different camps, right? And granted, in movie posters, you can kind of even find a middle ground. So there is a version of the right that you can technically do in Photoshop as well. But these are the extremes, okay? So extreme on the right, on the left, extreme on the right. So it's kind of like your spectrum, right? Saying a lot with pictures, saying a lot less with graphics, okay? And just to kind of show you a big picture overview of the steps, I like to think of it in 4 steps, this project, right? Obviously you see the movie, right? You pick your movie. After that, step 1 is, once you know your movie and you want to pick it, you have to ask yourself the question, oh, what's the theme? Like, what's the story? What is the theme of this movie, right? What's it all about in 1 sentence, okay? And we kind of talked about that last class, right? So it's 97%, right? It's looking for love, right? Or lost love, right? Everyone has a different kind of spin on it, right? But what do you take away from it? What is it in 1 sentence to you? Oh, this is a movie about, missed opportunity, or it's about, just, the humor of being distracted. Like, whatever the theme is to you, like, we kind of narrowed that down, right? SOAR is, some people would say, is like, aiming for your dreams, or, going above and beyond, right? So what is that central theme, that story, what is it about? Chicano would be identity, right? It's a film about identity and adopting identity through other identities that are not there, right? So it's ultimately about identity, but identity in Hispanic culture, Latino culture, right? And so that could be one theme, right? But what is it to you? Okay, what does it mean to you? And as a designer, this is where your creativity kicks in. Like, oh, you as the artist, what do you take away from it? What do you think is the story that you want to communicate about the film, right? So you're already making a decision creatively about the story and the theme. Does that make sense? So you're making a decision on the first part. The second decision you make in step 2 is, now you have to make decisions about the graphics to step 1, right? So you made a choice about what it is, the theme is. Now you have to decide, what are the graphics or the pictures that reflect or symbolize step 1, right? So we're taking it deeper, right? So if it's, lost love, missed love, then what are the pictures, right? Connected back to your film, right? Oh, well, I saw cell phone images in the film, or this whole, mobile phone and train imagery is kind of like the graphics that I remember from the film, or these are some of the big picture ideas, right? If you were drawing the movie on paper, what are the things you would draw? Oh, I draw trains, I would draw cell phones, I would draw hearts, I would draw this, right? We think about it like that. So that's your second decision, okay? Once you make that decision for step 2, then your third decision is now combining, right? How do I alter? How do I arrange? How do I color? How do I use, what kind of lines, what kind of shapes, what kind of scaling and spaces, your principles of design. Now you're putting it all together and working out some of the elements, okay? And that happens on paper first, easily. Typically, those are the thumbnail sketches, which we're gonna see tonight, hint, hint. So just throwing that out there, okay? And then the last decision, once we come and make the decision, once we build the graphic, right, is that font, right? What's the font? What is the style that we're gonna put onto the poster and that best represents the film, okay? So, there's a lot of variation, but I like to think in terms of like big concept ideas or principles, and I think there's 4 principles to this project, okay? So these are the decisions you guys will be making. That's your map, okay? This is your treasure map, so to speak. Does that make sense for everybody? Just like how that all kind of flows there? Okay. So before we talk about thinking a little bit deeper, this is how you're gonna feel emotionally. Because I think no one talks about the emotions about the process. So, okay, professor, I understand, but no one really tells you how you're gonna feel about this. And this is a little meme I picked up, but this is pretty true, right? You're gonna feel that this is an awesome project and you start off great. Then you're gonna get deeper and you're gonna go, uh-oh, this is tricky, right? And this is turning into a little bit more of a slightly complex thing than I thought. Then you're gonna build it and you're gonna think, oh my God, this is shit. This is terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever thought of or created. And then you're gonna think you're shit. And you're gonna feel like this is a reflection of who you are as a person, which it's not. It's a lie, okay? Everyone's their own worst critic, so please be aware of that. Don't dig a pit, okay? It's a lot better than you think it is. It looks better than you think. And then you start to get a little better and you think, oh, okay, I'm okay. I think it's coming around. I'm using my colors. I'm using my, my elements of art. I'm echoing the art style. The lines are similar. The colors are working really well. The shapes and the sizes and everything I learned from my t-shirt project is kind of coming into play into this project. And I see the connections all kind of coming in. And then when we finally turn it in, you say, I'm awesome. This is great. Okay. And so I would say this is pretty much every project throughout most of everybody's career, right? And how you handle it is all a question of where you are in your life at this point, right? So just be aware that some people react better to the certain steps than others. I think when you're new, you kind of feel like number 2 and number 3, maybe even a little bit of number 4, right? But it's really more about getting your mindset around 1, 5, and 6, okay? And really make 5 like your 0, like this is gonna be okay. This is awesome, right? I'm gonna be okay at the end of this. I'm learning. So every time I'm gonna get better and better every time I do something graphically or creatively, okay? So that's the emotional process. I'm just letting you know in advance, this is what it's gonna feel like, okay? And in terms of just going back to the thinking process, okay? We're gonna think it visually. So this is all about visual pictures and thinking visually, okay? So when I look at your thumbnail sketches, I'm just looking at visuals and how you're thinking about pictures. But just keep in mind, right, that everybody thinks in different ways. So your pictures are all gonna look a little different, okay? Different people, different thoughts, different ideas, different pictures, different elements, okay? And that is totally cool. So just be aware, it's not one way, it's many ways. And every way is different according to the context. So different people, different thoughts, different thinkings. That's what makes this project so cool. That's what makes graphic design so cool, so great at the end of the day, okay? So we talked about the emotions. We talked a little bit about the big picture overview, right? And now I always like to think about just kind of like, how we think about things and when it comes to the project. And I've kind of mentioned it a little bit. I always like to think in frameworks and stuff. But we have the 4 steps on how to do it on a making level, right? Thinking about it in combination. But psychologically, if you're interested in like it's just psychology, I always, when I think about the person that like goes and watches this film, or somebody that ever like uses a product or a service or anything that they see graphically that represents a product or a service, right? Like I'm always thinking about the other person, and I'm thinking about like who they are, my target audience, right? It's also known for those business heads that are out there, those business folks. Like, who are you targeting? Who are you talking to? And is it a guy? Is it a girl? How old are they? What exactly is this person look like, right? And what do they remember about your film, right? And when you're thinking about what they remember, that's kind of like what you remember in a way. And remember, we're designing for attention, right? Like we want to get their attention. And the goal at the end of the day is to make them aware of the film, of the story, by showing them a little bit of the story in the graphic. Okay, does that make sense? So you could sell the star, you could sell, and that's a completely valid way of selling your a movie, and that happens a lot these days. Like, well, if this famous person's in it or this great actor's in it, I'm gonna possibly watch it, right? But back in the old days, before pop culture became a thing, you had to basically rely on telling the story graphically, and that comes down to, how do I get your attention with the focal point? Asking, what is my goal, right? I want to get your attention. I want to tell the story, and how am I going to achieve that, right? So if I had to rearrange things a little bit, I probably would start here above anything, and say like, oh, who are you talking to, and what is it about this person that we're communicating about? Okay, does that make sense? So that's kind of like who your person is, right? Like, who's going to see it? Okay. Then then as we think about who this person is, then we think about the steps to creating your project, which is the making part of it. Okay. And then in the middle of all this, you got the emotions flowing all throughout that process, right? So I would say it's about who it is, right? Who's that person? What are they thinking? How am I going to get their attention with graphic design, right? Focal point, creating that focal point, creating that contrast. How are we going to plan for this? How are we going to solve this? And well, the planning is right here. That's your plan. It's 4 steps. Okay. And then the thing that teachers don't really mention is the emotional side. How am I going to feel about it? Ultimately. Okay. So that's going to be our big picture. Okay. Now, when we're constructing this, believe it or not, we're going to actually follow the same process as we did for the Mickey Mouse project. Okay. There's 2 ways we can do this. Okay. And we can basically draw the image. And if you feel comfortable drawing the image, you can, and you can scan it or take a picture on your phone and redraw it using like pen tools and other elements and graphics in your design, right? So we have that one perspective, or you can find a graphic online and you can take that graphic that you found online and kind of redraw it yourself, okay? So we kind of dug deep into that for part 1 with the Mickey graphic. But tonight I'm actually going to focus in on part 2 here, which is your icon and something called image trace or live trace in Illustrator, okay? So this is some new stuff, but I don't know if you knew this, but Illustrator can draw, okay? And people go, oh my gosh, why? What are you talking about? And well, I'm going to show you right now how Illustrator can do this and how it can draw it graphically and what you need to be aware of, okay? So we're going to look at the part 2 format, which is, searching for the icon and finding that image, but ultimately using Illustrator to image trace that graphic for you, okay? And just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have even heard of the live trace tool or image trace tool in Illustrator? You can, little thumbs up emoji there overall, okay? Oh, Danielle, I saw your concept then. That's how you felt about the last project. Yes, you have to, I should probably tell you that like in class number 1, right? Like under mindset, that should be like its own little unit in and of itself, right? Okay, some of us sort of know and roughly know. Okay, I'll walk you through it. It's a really easy piece of tech, very helpful, very tempting to get caught up in it, but we'll kind of talk about that a little bit for tonight, okay? So essentially my whole thing is, what I like to do is that it's all about how you search, okay? And finding that graphic and how you retrieve that that matches to your sketch. And I know that for the last project, we talked about like going to Vecteezy and kind of like downloading elements. You could still do that too. And that's completely on the table for this project as well. So feel free to use that. This one's just another option to kind of build your graphic and design constructively, okay? So I'll use Chicano as an example because there might be some interesting elements in that. But we're gonna go through this option here and set that up, okay? Now, some of the things that we talked about for the film Chicano was that there was a certain theme, right? And we talked about identity, right? So it was about identity, but there was two topics happening here, right? We had Japan, and then we also had like really Los Angeles at the end of the day, right? So when I'm thinking about this project, you know, the themes that I have in my head is basically identity, Japan, Los Angeles, right? And those are really big topics, and there's a lot of directions we can go with this, right? Because Japan has tons of imagery representative of that, and Los Angeles has a lot of imagery representative of that too, okay? And so there's a lot of ideas that can kind of flow from that, okay? That come from that. So we have that. And we'll definitely take a look about those thumbnail sketches, okay? So we will look at thumbnail sketches in just a few moments, but I'm just gonna walk through this exercise for the sake of time, okay? And then we'll look at your sketches right after that. But basically, let's just say we know what we want from our thumbnail sketches, okay? I know thematically what I want. I know what is the identity and the concept that I want to build for this, okay? I ultimately have that concept built out in my head. Now I'm just going to build it using the program. So from here, identity, Japan, LA, what does that mean? What does that look like? Let's jump into it and talk about it with searching for some elements, okay? So I'm going to switch over to my browser. I'm going to open up Google Chrome here, or Safari, whichever your program of choice is. And I'm going to look at and just kind of think about like elements that represent Japan and Los Angeles. We'll think about Los Angeles, right? Now, one of the things that I remember from the film is that there was a lot of this sort of like lowrider culture, a lot of, you know, urban street, you know, imagery happening in here. And I'm just gonna, you know, find out those images, right? I'm gonna type in, you know, lowrider, and I'm also gonna add the word icon to my search, okay? And you'll notice here the word icon, okay? Now, icon basically means symbol, right? It's an image, it's symbol, it's kind of like a mark, a single graphic that's representative of the search, right? So icons can be very simple graphics, as you can see here in some of my search results for images. And they are vast, far, and many, right? So there's a lot of images that I pulled up there, right? Now, if I didn't include the word icon, then I would basically get videos, photos, lyrics, images. It's a very broad search, right? It's gonna give me the lowrider song, all that stuff. So it can't be so broad. Photos, right? We wanna narrow it down even further. And my little secret term for that is icon, because icon is really symbols, graphics, simple drawings, which connect to Illustrator, right? If Illustrator is about flat graphics and drawings, then I want that same idea happening for my sketch and for my design, okay? Does that kind of make sense a little bit? And so that's the idea behind it. And so, you know, I'm just looking at images. I already have an idea in my head, like what I want based on my thumbnail sketches. So we're just gonna, you know, roughly skip that step overall. And, you know, there's an interesting image over here that is kind of catching my eye a little bit. And this is a vector automotive lowrider. So If I click onto it, it might be available for me here, which it looks to be. And I'm going to try to download it. Now, if I can't download it, then I can try to right click and save the image, which is doing nothing for me at the moment. But if I go to the image, I can do that. So I can technically right click and save the image, or I could do a screenshot. If you have a Mac, that's Command-Shift-4, okay? So you can take a picture of your screen of the graphic, which is gonna be a Command-Shift-4, and you can literally drag over the image and screenshot it. Or you can right click, and if it gives you a save image as option, you can do that, okay? So we'll try that. We'll do a right click save image as, and we'll try to place that into the system there, okay? And I'm gonna save it onto my desktop as a PNG, okay? All right, once that's set, then I'm gonna open up my Adobe Illustrator program and remove a couple of elements here so you can see it. And then from here, you notice that I give you a file, right? So in the project, inside of Canvas, I give you the movie template. So you can literally start designing your poster on the template here on the right-hand side. So from here, you can totally start drawing in this area there. And I give you the credits, I give you the movie credits that it's ready to go, okay? And you get to decide on the film of your choice, right? So there's 3 options here. You notice there, it says short documentary, animated film by, a romantic comedy by. It's not meant for all 3. It's one of these is meant for your film, okay? So I'm going to be using this one, which is the short documentary by text, because that's the film Chicano that I selected, okay? So I wanna make sure that I make really clear about that we're gonna pick that one. Okay, I'm gonna select my selection tool, and it's in a lock layer here on the right-hand side. So if I look at my text, then the text is basically locked. So where it says movie credits, I'm basically, it's like how when I use this, move it up there. I'm basically going to unlock the layer, and it's set up for movie credits here, okay? And I can select the text after I unlock the movie credits layer, okay? So romantic comedy is not the one. Animated film is not my selection. I want the short documentary because I'm obviously talking about Chicano, right? So that's gonna be just a quick little tip on using your design, okay? I'm going to go to my working layer here on the top, move my layer back into my panels here. Zoom out. And now I can start bringing in my image, okay? I can go up to, I'm gonna go to my complete desktop over here so I can pull it up. So I'm gonna go to desktop 1. Okay. I'm gonna, you don't want that in that. So let's go ahead and close that. Okay. I'm gonna go to File, and towards the center of my image is gonna say Place, or center of my menu, I should say, a little bit past the center. I'm gonna Place. And place basically means I'm going to put something into this document. And I'm going to make sure that I look for my desktop or my file that is, or I'm going to look on my desktop for my file, which is the screenshot or my saved graphic. So whether it's a screenshot, it'll say screenshot on the top here. If it's saved, it'll say the name of the file. I'm just going to place the name of the file or the screenshot. Either or is fine by clicking place on the lower right. And I'll see this little preview image of the graphic floating around and following me. So wherever it's gonna land, it's okay. I'll basically land it on the right-hand side here so you can see it. And I'm gonna land it in there, okay? Now this is kind of nice because it actually gave me a transparency, which I was not expecting. And that's a nice thing to have. I'm going to say that for most people, we're going to see something from a screenshot perspective, which looks a little bit more like this, okay? So if you see a background, just be aware, okay, that if there's a white background, we'll need to do some more editing. So we'll work off the white background just so I can cover more ground for you guys this evening, okay? So this may or may be a successful output, we'll see. So we have this image here, okay? And I basically want Illustrator to trace it for me, to draw it for me, okay? I'm going to make sure that it's selected or highlighted, okay? And I'll see the little bounding box with the nodes all around. And then from here, I can basically go down to Object, come down to the menu where it says Image Trace, and I can click Make. Okay, and it's subtle, but all of a sudden I noticed the artwork kind of shift in quality. Okay, and what just happened there? Well, the program basically tried to redraw based on its default settings, its original settings, the drawing. If I want to see what the settings are, then I'm going to click onto my properties panel on the right, or I can pull up properties. So properties panel is here on the right-hand side. It says properties. And then towards the bottom, there's the image trace option here, which is kind of broken into almost kind of like its own little like section on the lower right, okay? So this is the quicker version of that. But right next to it, in the second smaller square, okay, there is a little menu button. And this button here is my options menu. This is actually where I can click and open up the panel for my image trace, which has all the specific information about the image trace, right down to the view mode, the tracing, color mode options, the threshold, which is the level of tracing. It's basically the details to the tracing and how the program is tracing it, okay? So I pull that up through the properties menu, which is under image trace, or you can go to window, properties to retrieve your window, okay? Window, properties, and you'll see your image trace option there, okay? So you'll always see it under properties, image trace, or live trace. It was previously called. So image trace is there. So I really want the menu to appear, and I'll have it float over my graphic. In fact, I'll move it a little bit off to the side so you can kind of see a little bit of everything there, okay? And on the lower right here, I can basically get a preview of the graphic. And the presets, there's a few presets here that you can explore. For example, the default is technically more of a black and white logo trace feature, which is kind of what it's assuming it's doing. So technically default is black and white, but there's other options that it gives you depending on if it has colors or not, right? Like you can do sketch art, which sort of sketches the object and removes the white background for you. So that's a nice option to have. We'll probably stick with this one tonight. There's silhouettes, which kind of takes like the outline and does a much darker silhouette of the drawing. There's line art, which can be really 50-50 on its success rate, depending on like how smart the program is. Typically when Illustrator does updates, yeah, that's probably not exciting, but it does kind of look at like the outline and kind of tries to think for you. But you're starting to notice a little bit that the program is not as smart or as intricate as a human, right? So it has its strengths, but it also has its major weaknesses, okay? So, and there's even technical drawings, okay? So, choose wisely your image. I always like to start from the source. So I always look for images that the program can do a better job tracing than me. So it's not as smart yet to do the drawing. Does that make sense? So just be aware, the reason why I showed you guys in the beginning to pen tool is because you're actually smarter than the image trace, right? It doesn't know what the elements of art is. It doesn't know beauty. It doesn't know balance. It doesn't know aesthetics. It doesn't know, really where the harmony is in the design. Those are very human qualities, right? Maybe one day, 20 years from now, it may have some more, intelligence behind it, which is what Adobe is trying to do every day. But at the end of the day, be aware that it's not perfect, and your eye, your human touch, your understanding, your context of the project is what's going to drive your decisions. And the program is just a tool. Okay, so it's just a tool. So you have to guide it in the way that it can. But I do believe in pushing and saving time with the tool to leverage, my project and get done faster. So that's always a nice thing to have. Let's continue. So sketch art looks pretty good. Okay. Tracing results is basically saying tracing result. You can have tracing results with outlines. So it basically shows you previews what it's going to look like with outlines. You can see the artwork in outlines. You can see the artwork with a source image to compare the two, or the source art. So it's basically like, hey, this is what it's going to look like traced. Or, hey, do you want to see it in comparison to the original picture? This is a nice one to have. If you notice in the light blue, not everything translated compared to the old graphic. And that's pretty good to know, right? So outlines with the source image is a nice thing to have, okay, compared to the original image. So it's just giving you some options on what looks good, what doesn't look good, And for some, you might be okay with this. You might be like, you know what, Professor, I'm okay with that. This is looking good. But maybe you want more detail or less detail. That's where threshold comes, okay? So right here below is a threshold, and it's a slider. And what the threshold does is that it basically kind of defines the drawing. And it kind of makes it loose and sort of nothing. And if you go up on the threshold, it adds some slightly more detail, with slightly more detail, with slightly more detail, with a lot of detail, which then kind of turns into a silhouette or a big blob. So you get to decide just how much of the drawing looks authentic or accurate. Does that make sense? So threshold is the level of drawing or detail you want in your graphic. And wherever it is, you could still go in and edit it using your direct selection tool. So you can always start somewhere and add on to that, okay? You can go to advanced level and go really intense, where you can basically modify the paths and say, hey, with the paths, we want more drawings. I want more corners or more anchor points, or less noise or more noise to reduce it, which is the level of jankiness in the artwork, right? So you get to decide, but in your mind, you're thinking about like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. So you'll probably be experimenting more in this tool than anything, okay? This is looking okay to me for the most part. I'm kind of thinking about like the overall picture / the details, and this is looking okay to me, right? Like I think the balance of the art is decent, okay? So from here, we got it. Snapping curves to lines are other details where it's kind of like, hey, do we want the curvature to basically connect to lines or pathways? You can decide. It's really almost the same, give or take. I'm gonna go to tracing results and kind of show the tracing result with images as kind of a final look. And that's the tracing result there, okay? So if everything looks great, then you're set and ready to rock and roll. And then you can basically take this image and kind of modify it and play around with it, okay? So you can now bring in your graphic and notice that like, because there is no white background from the picture, I can draw things behind it and play some elements, right? I can scale up, I can scale down. It's not that bad, right? But then I always have a question from the class, right? Which is, hey, professor, so just really quick, like, what if I want to change like a specific line or section in the artwork? Like, how can I do that? Like, what do you recommend I do? Well, if you want to get down and let the computer draw everything out so you can go in and edit it, then the idea here is that you want to do something called an expand, okay? And what expand basically is a fancy word for draw it, and draw it in using the pen tool. So pen tool it for me, draw it for me, bring this thing to life. Okay, does that kind of make sense? And so we want it to come to life. We want the computer to pen tool it for me and put it together. So I'm going to do that. The expand button is located in two places. Okay, one is over here under Properties panel, where it says Quick Actions Expand on the bottom. This button here, you can click onto it, and it'll basically expand it. And before I expand, let me show you the next location. Under Object Menu, it's over here on the left where it says Expand. Okay, so multiple locations. Okay, Menu. Under Object Menu, it's about almost halfway or less than halfway. It's called an expand. Okay, so look what happens when I click onto expand. Okay, let me clear my window. It's literally going to take like 1 second. But when I click onto it, it's going to basically go from an outline to a path. Did you see that? So it has created a path. Okay, and that's line art. Now before, I'll do a Command Z, it was just a picture drawn in kind of like Photoshop mode, I guess you could say, right? But if I want to go in and edit the line art, I have to go to expand mode. So when I click onto the expand button, pretty cool how it drew it out for me. And you can even see the paths here as I click onto it. But be aware, right, that it's not perfect, right? Like, look how janky those lines are. It's pretty rough. It's pretty janky, and we might have to go in and clean some of this stuff up, clean some of this artwork up, right? And when you're ready to clean it up, then we're basically going to use our direct selection tool and even our curvature tool to fix it. So curvature tool, if you guys remember, is it takes paths and you can basically fix the curve on the path there. And the curvature tool can edit the curve and make straight lines very, very easily. Okay. Or you can manually use the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow, and you can click onto specific anchor points, specific points, and pull the handles in all these different directions. Okay. So back in the day, before curvature tool, there was the good old fashioned direct selection tool where we had to do everything ourselves. Okay, now I'm jealous of you guys because you have more power than we did like 10 years ago. But basically, if I want to make an edit, I can literally like zoom in, and let's say I want to take like the highlight of the windshield here. And with my direct selection tool, I can go with the tip of the arrowhead over a point. And when I see a point, I'm going to see the little white box over the corner, and that means there's a point over it. And I can literally just click and pull it. I can take a handle and extend it. Okay. I can modify, adjust, right? I have some power here, right? And now I can make edits. I can clean up the artwork because the program doesn't do a really good job of cleaning up the art, right? I can go to my pen tool, and when I go to the pen tool, I can delete certain points, because when I go to pen tool and I see the little minus sign on the lower right, that means I can delete points. Okay. So that's helpful. I like to delete points with the pen tool because it keeps and preserves the line intact. So it maintains it as a closed vector object. Okay. And that's nice to have. If I use the curvature tool, okay, I can go to my curvature tool and do the same thing. I can take specific points, click onto them, but notice that like as I move the points, it's also kind of flexing all the other curves to kind of to make it straight for you. So this is kind of nice. This is actually doing what I did with the previous point, but it's making it a whole lot easier. So I like curvature tool probably a little bit more than the old-fashioned way, because it's actually calculating all the other points and saying, you know what, if you want to smooth this curve, chances are you probably want to smooth all this the previous and the next curves surrounding that element. So I probably would recommend using the curvature tool before anything to fix your artwork and reverse engineer it a little bit so that you kind of get those straight lines, remove some points, delete others if need be, so that you can really get the effect that you want, which is a straight line, smooth curve at the end of the day, okay? So that is literally the image trace tool happening in a nutshell, okay? And I'm gonna stop it there because I wanna give you guys some time to build that art, to flex it, and then we'll talk about layout and principles of design for next sessions, because one part of it is the layout. Yes, I totally get it. Yeah, but tonight is like, hey, what's the artwork? What's the quality of the artwork? And what's the echoing of the art style that I want to create with that? Okay. So that's how the idea is. Okay. If I'm looking into the Japan artwork, my recommendation would be to think about echoing the art style for the second elements, right? So if you notice, my lowrider was photographic, slightly more detailed. So I'm going to echo the art style, remember that term, for Japan, right? So I'm going to find similar images, similar graphics that have a similar look and feel to echo the art style so that it's having harmony right from the very beginning, okay? Does that kind of make sense, guys? So image trace is really helpful, and students get a little bad, like, Professor, you suck. We could have done this all along. It's like, yes, we could have, but you see how rugged and janky it is? It's not clean, but it does the trick. And put it this way, like, your t-shirts look better than the live trace ever did its first round, right? So it took a little bit longer, but it's good to know because now you can see the quality of the art versus human and the technology side. Does that make sense, guys? So that's the idea. That's the version there. Okay. So any questions just on the technical side of things? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, very, very cool. Here's what we're gonna do. We're going to take a look at your thumbnail sketches. Now, I'm realistic, and there's always a few of us that go, oh snap, I didn't do it. Okay, so just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have some thumbnail sketches to share for us this evening? Okay, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. Okay, some of us do, some of us don't. Okay, cool. No judgment, okay? Now, if you don't, it helps to know what you got, but we'll give you some time. So why don't we do this? Why don't we give everybody like what, 30 minutes to get their thumbnail sketches together, okay? Get some ideas down, whip together some thumbnail sketches. We'll share it as a class. But for those that know what their concept is, you can start looking for your artwork using some of the techniques I just showed you. Okay, is that fair for everybody? Okay, so it's 7:45 now. I would say 8:15. Is that a good time to check in to see how you're doing with your thumbnail sketches? Okay, and remember, your thumbnail sketches is ugly. Okay, the uglier the better. So just feel free to do doodles, stick figures. All we want to know is what is going where and where's the title. So where's the big title going to go? Because we're promoting a film, right? And where does the lowrider go? Where does your Japanese graphic go? Where does the cell phone image go? Just give me like a rough image of where things are going to lay out so that I know the type of image that's going to go into it or where you like it to go. Does that make sense? So the uglier the better. Okay. All right. I got to shut up so I can give you guys time to lab it up. Let's give you guys some time to do that for 30 minutes. If you have questions, issues, or concerns, I'll open up a breakout room and then we can talk specifically about some of the artwork, but we're getting into it now. So we'll start building up from there. And then I will pause the recording now so that we can go into breakout room. Okay. All right, guys. We'll see you guys in about 30 minutes or you can meet me in the breakout room right after that. Quick question. There was a template on Canvas that has 8 sections. So I would say 8. Yeah, try to go for 8, Sylvia. Okay. I just went with 8 because the sheet allowed for it. And it's always nice just to kind of come up with variations, right? Normally after the, 2 or, first 2, you get a rough idea of your 3rd and 4th. But the more thumbnails that you explore, the better. And I've seen professionals go as high as 16, 20, and 32 because it's a lot faster to do thumbnail sketches than using it on the computer, as you see. Okay, so you notice that like it takes some time doing it on the computer, and there's always arguments, right? Like, well, I work better on the computer. It's like, I know, but most people that do well on the computer have already kind of figured out different layouts in their head, right, of where things go, and they've kind of done enough, practiced enough to kind of work out some of the layouts in their mind, right? We're new to this, so I just want to see your thinking, your layout, your composition, it's called. And I just want to see where your composition is, right? Are you thinking focal point? Are you thinking asymmetrically? And those are really the key areas I'm looking for in your poster or your thumbnail sketch, right? Is it asymmetrical? Where's your focal point? And what's the theme in your mind? Like, what are you thinking about is the most important thing that you want to show your audience? What's the focal point? Okay. It's faster to do it on paper than it is to do one for 30 minutes on the computer screen. Does that make sense? It's so much faster to think about it on paper, and it's so free. It's just less stressful too. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not it's just paper. There it goes. Okay. So it's just it's a way to kind of save you guys emotionally, so you don't feel like crap early in the project because of the one. So I'm just trying to prevent, your emotional wave to go to 3, 4, and 5, or 3 and 4. Sketches are great just to kind of just go, here you go. Here's what I'm thinking real quick. And this one, okay, let's build it. Okay. It's just a map. It's just a strategy. All right. Okay. 8:15. We'll check in. Have fun with it, guys. And I'm going to open up a breakout room so that you can join me in case you have any questions or concerns. All right. I'm going to put it on pause. We'll see you in a few. Okay, guys. So we are back, and we wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Give you guys a few extra minutes. So hopefully we got some concepts that we could share, and we'll take a look at them pretty much on a one-on-one basis. Okay. We will be asking you guys to either shoot them out to me via email if you can, or if you want to turn on your camera, you can literally put it onto the camera on screen and share a little bit. It'll probably be a little bit easier that way too. Whichever is the most convenient, but we'll do like a couple just to kind of process some thoughts and see what you're thinking about the film. Okay. So we'll jump into that, and just kind of going back to the steps. All I'm really looking for in your concepts is just your thinking. Like, what are you thinking about? How are you thinking about it? And then the end of the day, right? What's the first step, which is like your theme? So what's the theme of the film, and what is some of the graphics or the really rough positioning of those graphics that you're thinking about? Okay. So those are the first 2 steps. Okay. So I'm just looking at concepts, looking at the idea, seeing where you are between these step 1 and step 2, and we're gonna jump in and take a look at it. Okay. So if you want to volunteer, you can type it in the chat, or you can go first. But any brave souls want to share their concepts, we can take a look at it and see where you might be, what you're thinking about for the project. Feel free to type it in, or you can give it a little thumbs up, and then we can kind of get you there. Okay, we have a brave soul. All right, Danielle. Cool.
So,
all right, go for it.
I'll share, but I kind of did I drew it on the computer. Like, I did the little squares, but I did it on the computer.
Okay.
And then I have like a rough draft also. Do you want to see that?
Yeah, that's perfect. We'll take a look at those too. I'm just raising up the volume a little bit so you can hear you. Yeah, let's take a peek first of the concept. Okay, awesome. This is a really good example. No, this is great. This is actually a really good example of what you're going for. So Okay, so which film did you decide to go with? It looks like you went with Soar.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So walk us a little bit through each of the concepts and tell us your thinking, your process.
Well, that like contrast, like a lot of, half of it took place in the day. There was a light out, and then at night. So I had like the clouds and stars to represent the sky. I first was thinking like, I don't know, I just drew the blue bag because it kind of stood out. Then the third square, the size of the girl versus the boy, like another contrast. The blueprint stood out to me a lot. I thought that would be kind of a cool concept because that's kind of what like solved the problem. It started the film and like solved the issue in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing, like key element that I really liked was the plain on her shirt. So it was like stitched on. It was like a little plaid plain stitched on. And then that last little drawing was just, lots of up and down, the plane crashing. Like, so it was like all the attempts of trying to fly.
Okay.
So awesome. Those are my little squares there.
Okay. And just a quick little side note. So the title will always be on the top, right? Like we're just kind of imagining the text in that sort of empty space for the most part. Just to kind of make sure, like, so the thumbnail sketches are working pretty good. At some point, like you did for the fourth one there on the top, we also want to include like the title so we know if it's going to be like straight or angled or anything of that sort, which is fine. So wherever the writing goes, that's going to be important too, like the typography and things of that sort. Even as just like the title or a box that represents like the location of the title, it's always good to also kind of roughly include that as well within the thumbnail sketch. But this is great. And I guess the question, first of all, is like, which one's your favorite concept? Like, which one are you gravitating towards when it comes to just the idea, the theme that kind of resonates with you?
I kind of combined a couple. So it was the split. So I liked that like half, like the cloudy sky and then the stars in the sky. And then I also took like I guess from her shirt, the plain, how it was like a patch, like it was stitched on. And so I kind of like went with that. I'll show you. I just took little pieces from each one.
Okay. Let's take a look. And then while you're doing that, what's the theme for you? Like, what does this film say to you about just the story or about life or?
I took the theme like keep trying because they were, it seemed like she gave up a couple times and kept trying and then they succeeded.
Okay, so as we're looking at the design, we're thinking of the concept of the theme of keep trying. So I'm thinking about that as I'm like processing the graphic. Okay.
Yes. Can you see that?
Now we do.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. So I like where it's going. So it's going good. It's going pretty good. And yeah, it's already starting to make sense. So like immediate contrast is what we see here. And the one quick thing I'll mention is that where it says the minimalist poster, this is a rough draft, but hopefully this is going to end up going into the final template, which is more of a poster template, more vertical than it is a sheet or paper sheet. Just wanted to throw that out there. So the template that I gave you, it may have not downloaded. That's probably because of the sharing access. I know Eric tried to get it. So yeah, on the right-hand side.
Yeah, after. So I'll try and rework it.
Okay, so this is just like super rough and just kind of developing concept. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Well, how do you feel about it? Like, if you had to kind of critique it from principles of design, what are your initial thoughts? Just, I know it's super early. It's only been a few minutes. you know, it's probably not fair to kind of ask that, but do you have like just some first impressions so far in terms of principles?
I mean, contrast is present. I see like movement with the dotted lines. It kind of takes, you know, the plane crashing and then flying up. So there's like that movement. Sorry, I don't know.
That's fine. That's fine. So for me, I'm thinking about like the concept of keep trying, right? So, you know, as I'm like, and this is very subjective. This is just like, you know, just personal reaction, just first reactions from there. You know, like I always try to tie in this like graphic with story or graphic with theme, right? Like, what are some interesting or creative ways that we can show this plane that's keeping or trying? Like, I know it's going upward, right? But could we show more of like the distress of it? Like, I think, yeah, and if I'm being nitpicky, that's a good sign. Like the plane going pathward down, trying. I think it's more line. I think like probably. Let me take a look here. I'm gonna try to annotate a couple of things. I think the first thing that comes to mind is going to be the title, right? As we're developing it, are you thinking about matching the title closer to the film's title, or a completely different font altogether? What are you thinking about?
I'm not really sure. I just kind of like pulled. It was like one of the first fonts. I didn't like look very hard for it. And I just was kind of seeing where it went. So I did like the original font and how it had like the propeller as the, right? It was a propeller as the O. Mm-hmm. I believe so. I did like that. But I didn't want to just like steal it from the original poster. But yeah, I did eyeball that.
You can. I think you could, because you're promoting that same film, you could totally pull from that font because they're kind of in the same camp. So we'll imagine that like the film, the creator gave you full access to do that design or use that font. So we could pull from that. So that's totally cool. I think the stitching, now the representation of the stitching was that it reminded you of like the design on the shirt, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the stitching. Do you have a screenshot or a freeze frame of that somewhere floating around by any chance?
Let's see. What am I doing? View.
Perfect. Okay, this is a nice example of how you're putting your images next to the graphic to reference them. So this is a good way of looking at process. So I love that. I love this for a first time demonstration. Okay, so you really got in close. So I totally forgot that graphic as well. Like, oh wow, that's right. Like, how did that look? So, and it's on us, and it's on the graphic itself. Okay. So I think for myself, I would even wonder if we can even go slightly more detail to that image of the graphic, but I know this is a first run. And I think for stitching, the contrast is like from night to day. So you're showing us that. I'm almost wondering if there's or if there's a way to maybe like make the stitching create more of a contrast with the stitching. Like what if the stitching was pulled back a little bit? I'm wondering. At least around the frames of the rectangular background, like the light blue and the dark blue, because it's like creating a super contrast to it. But I'm almost wondering if there should be like one nice stitch line to kind of bring it together, like around, or even maybe a little bit thinner around that edges. Okay. Almost wondering if there's like more contrast to it. Like I'm trying to decide if the stitching should exist in the path and the plane, and not so much on the background itself. But
so
you were saying?
The frame is a little bit different than the rest of it. Like everything else is like the outline, where the frame, I kind of like pulled it in a little bit. So you're saying like have the stitch be, let's see. Like,
yeah, like a little bit more outline so that it's, because with the line, the line vertical in the center and the stitching, it almost feels like there's more of like a separation. Like it almost seems like there's a lot of stitch going on. So I almost want to see if there's maybe like a balance between like stitching on like the star, the plane, and it's sort of like trail, and possibly clouds, and then for like the type in the background, it's contrasted by like less stitching, lighter stitching, or maybe even a different color altogether. So it's almost kind of like, and even the color of the stitching, we could even modify too. I ran this with Alexa. I remember doing this too, like last week, where you can actually like click onto the path. Like let's say you click onto one of the outlines of your stitch, and you can even change that color from like a black to maybe like a darker shade of blue, or same shade for the outline, but slightly darker. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Whoops.
And you can hold down the shift key and then see if that absorbs the color. So you'll click onto the stroke.
So like, sorry. So we want to change just the outline to like what
like
color?
A slightly darker shade of the background color, maybe like 2 or 3 shades.
Right now it's dark. So right now the line is like a dark blue. So
okay. So I would even possibly maybe go a little bit lighter on it, as a possibility as well. So then that way it's a little, it has more subtlety to it. But I'm being nitpicky, so I don't want to jump in too deep into it. I kind of want to see it just for like its overall value, because I could even get caught up with like all the details and things like that because I'm already jumping into it. In terms of just like concept, like what you like and jumping into the layout, I think it's working, right? I like keep trying, like it's going from day to nighttime and it succeeds at night. Like that whole concept of like left to right, I think is working pretty well. When it comes to like the detailing and the weights and the brush strokes, or these stitches, I would say like we'll have to continue experimenting with like the weight of the stitch, the thickness of the stitch, so it looks a little bit more detailed, more refined, maybe a little bit more subtle with playing with some of the shades of blue and colors, and maybe going lighter on some of the stitching, on the lighter backgrounds, and just to kind of give it a little bit of a subtle range of stitch color, if that makes sense. So, and then the font as well. But I think it's working conceptually. I think it's simple to the point that it's like we're getting the point across, and I think with a little bit more development on the details, we'll get to like the final concept, like overall, for that. So I think it's all about the details at this point, but the concept of going from like one to the next and trying is like, to me, kind of coming through. I think it's like moving in the right direction overall. Okay.
All right.
Does that kind of make sense a little bit? Because I'm just kind of thinking about it from like a conceptual point of view. Like, do I see the theme? Yes. Do I note it? Is it minimal? Yes. Now it's like trying to find a balance between like the detail, adding a bit more detailing, but keeping a little bit of the balance at the same time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So it's just finding that balance, at the end of the day. But I think it's working. I think it's making sense, and I think it's a nice demonstration of like, oh, okay, this is the concept, and this is how I converted it into a first draft, and now we're gonna continue to develop that draft a little bit more and more. Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Not painful. Thank you.
Not too painful. Yeah. Looks good. Okay. This is good. That was a great example. And And did that kind of help you guys a little bit in terms of like, oh, okay, like I kind of get it. And this is kind of like going in that direction and what we want to do overall. Okay, let's go ahead and maybe do a couple more just for time. So does anyone want to share one out there and just kind of want to show us, you know, it could be on screen really quick. Here's the concept. Here's some of the graphics. Doesn't have to be like Danielle's, okay? It could be like, here's a picture that I found that I'm working with. So that's okay too. Anyone want to volunteer their graphic really quick and kind of give a little example on theirs? James? Okay. If you have some concept, James, that's fine. It'll help us work out theme and see where you're going and what you're thinking overall, okay? So we'll take a look at it. It could be as simple as popping it on screen so we can see what your concepts are and what you're thinking about, okay? So well, are we gonna see it on the actual camera or are you gonna put it like on the upper, yeah, let's like on your little
I'm gonna put it on my camera, so yeah. So give me a second to just show it.
Cool. All right, I gotta use that OBS software, man. Because if I could teach the way you display, that would be awesome.
It's free to do, and I could show you after like class is over then.
On those, let's pick a day. Probably Thursday because I'm off on Friday and I'll have time to go overtime and I can sleep in on Friday, so that's always a good thing. All right. Okay, so all right, so we did it digitally. I'm okay with that. And let's take a peek. So I see 3 of the films. Is there one film you're gravitating towards more than the other that you kind of resonating with?
Yeah, it's the comedy romantic one, which is 97% heart.
97%. Okay. And what's the theme of the story to you? Like what is the theme in your eyes? What does it say to you about life?
Like it's mostly focusing on that you shouldn't focus on what's being shown on the screen all the time. Like, don't believe everything you see like on your screen.
Okay. So don't believe everything what you see on screen. And so the opposite of that in the reference to the film is what then? So what should I be paying attention to if I'm not on the screen?
Like you should mostly be focusing on what's actually in front of you rather than what you want to believe is on a screen.
Okay, so I like that, right? Like it's really about not looking at your screen, focusing what's on front of you, right? So that theme is like the theme, like focus what's in front of you, right? So the trick is like, okay, well, which one of these concepts that you've developed is saying that more than the other?
Yeah, because like it's more, I think it's feeling like the second one I did on the bottom.
Okay.
For it is showing it more because it's showing that the person running is being blind to the obvious in front of them, and they're just focusing on something else instead, which is the screen.
Okay, so I see that, right? Like there's life happening there, right? And it's 97%. The trick whenever we're advertising something, it's always trying to like say the theme, say like the story, but also kind of bring it back to like relating it to the film. So in my mind, I'm almost wondering like, oh, I wonder what it would look like if you kind of combine your 2 concepts, right? Like, you know, what if it was, you know, similar, like there's someone's phone in hand, but in the background is like there's somebody running or there's someone there. Does that kind of make sense? Or or what if it's, you know, this person is searching for love and their cell phone is in their hand as they're searching for love in your second concept, you know? Just kind of tying into that mobile component a little bit, you know? And it's really the guy with the phone, right? So that's an easy fix. Like you could show us the guy searching for love, chasing after this woman and, you know, phone in hand, woman in the background, sitting in the train through the silhouette of the train, you know, or the window of the train, I should say. So, I like the second concept in reference to that because I could say more and kind of communicate a little bit more and give you a little hint of the film and what it's saying, you know? Could I technically do that with the first one? Yeah, we could get creative and we could basically say like, you know, there's someone nearby, but in the background of that first concept, like you literally see like the woman walking by or the woman in the distance, you know? So there's a couple of concepts there that do that. That second one does have a bit more of a focal point, more contrast, right? Action, motion, right? Like there's a little bit more activity going on, right? Versus like the first one where it's just like a cell phone and a notification, you know? But each one is unique in the sense that like, well, one is trying to notify me of something and the other one is like telling me that there's activity going on in real life, you know? So it's subjective, you know, it comes down to like what you think is going to be the best, the best representation of the film that tells the story the best, that gets to the heart of what you think is like the most important thing you want people to take away from it, right? And if it's that second one that resonates with you, then we'll lean into the second one, okay? And then we'll kind of figure out and tie it into that. So, but you kind of see how I was trying to match theme and just trying to like think about ways to kind of like how to modify the graphics so that it kind of tells the theme even more or a bit more. So that's great. So I really like that. It's making sense to me, okay? And you can totally start looking for your graphics now, right? And finding some icons, imagery, elements, trains, silhouettes. We could even we could take a screenshot, kind of like that Neil did of the films, and do a silhouette or literally a trace of the figure of the male. We could find a similar graphic of a man in a suit or outfit and sort of outline him or find a silhouette, male silhouette, and add that. Now we can get really creative on how we can find the graphics and make it universal to the film in a simplistic way, minimalist way. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm loving it. I'm digging it. And I think it's moving in the right direction. Okay. So that's a good example too, as well, the thumbnail sketch and where we want to go with it so we can have a conversation. Okay. And that was 5 concepts in a few minutes. And we knew immediately, you know, which one is going to be the one that's going to kind of work with it. Okay. And that was the 4th one out of which I'm assuming, right? You did the first 3 and then the 4th one kind of hit for you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took 3 to get to the 4, to get to the one, which was your 4th. And that's what's so cool about thumbnail sketches is that it might not be your first idea. It might not be your second. It might even be your 3rd. It could be your 4th or your 5th. And so that's why thumbnail sketch is so important. It gets your ideas on paper, on screen, digitally, fast, without worry of like quality of art. Does that make sense? So it just helps you think faster so you can get to the solution, to the heart of the story of the project, of what you're trying to say graphically. So that's a good example of like, oh wow, look, the 4th one hit. And I think Danielle was the same, right? I know that was like your 4th or 5th concept you were kind of combining more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah, she's saying like kind of, it was like not the first, definitely not the first. So the thumbnail sketch protects you from falling in love with the first one, right? And that's a big theme. Do not fall in love with your art. Do not fall in love with it, because at the end of the day, if you're building for a client, a film, art director, it might not get selected at all. So you have to make sure you have enough ideas. It's all about quantity, not quality. Okay. I think we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. Does anyone want to share their thumbnail sketch, whether it's on paper, on screen, digitally? I think James has a good example of where you could be. Danielle has a good example of where you could be further along. Do we have any takers that want to share one more of the concept? On those? Oh, okay. So Alexa sent one via email. So we'll take a look at it and let me go ahead and retrieve that. But it sounds like this is making sense, right? And you should feel pretty comfortable about the progress of it. I think this class is definitely starting to really get the theme down. And that's really exciting because I think last semester it was kind of like, what is the theme? Now it's kind of like you guys are thinking on a deeper level, which is great. I love that. So I'm pretty excited for like how the art's gonna look between now and like Thursday, I would say. Okay. All right, I got a couple of emails. Yay. Okay, that's what those beeps were as we were talking. So let me double click a couple of these windows so we can see it big. And we got a couple here, so that's great. And we're gonna try to see if we can open them up. And looks like my Wi-Fi is a little bit slow, so I'm gonna try to disconnect some devices. Waiting for Outlook. Ooh, Wi-Fi is moving slow tonight.
I can share my screen.
I just saw it pull up really quick. Alexa, let me see if I can take 2 seconds. And I think I got it here. Let's see. But thank you for offering. Let's see. Hopefully we can see it. Boom. Okay, do we see that? All right. Okay, cool. So let's take a look here. Oh, can I go bigger? Yes. Okay, so Alexa, you're going for Chicano, right? It looks like that's the one. Let's see a lot more of that. Cool. Okay, so so in short, you know, what's the theme of the film to you? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I really resonated with like the whole lowrider aspect of it. Personally,
Okay.
I'm really into cars and I don't know, that resonated the most to me. A clip from the scene was the rear view mirror with a little sombrero on it hanging off. And I thought that was pretty, I don't know, it caught my eye the most. So like the second drawing, it's basically like someone looking into the mirror and then the Chicano title being backwards, like as if it was a sticker on the back side of the car, like on the window, the rear view window. So it's looking backwards. Then my other favorite one was in the first one of the second row. And it's basically like a heart over LA and then however Japan looks on the right. And it's a lowrider with like a dotted line going from LA to Japan.
Okay.
And then the last one of the third row where it's like a lowrider going into the sunset or whatever, but in the smog of the car, it would say Chicano, but in like a cloudy, like smoky font.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Little sketches.
Okay. And is there a favorite out of the three that you're kind of like gravitating towards that you think has potential if you were to execute?
Any of the three, so you could pick one.
Well, I'll let you pick. Like if I was the client and I was uncertain, like what you know, you could develop the three, right? But for the sake of time, let's say you know in a perfect world, technically, if we're going to showcase to the client, we would develop the three, right? And kind of compare the two.
I would say the second one then is probably going to depict like what the short film is trying to tell you.
So which one was that again? I missed that.
The second box, the second row, the first one in the second row.
Oh, okay. So, and the reason for selecting that one as the option you said was because
they talk about LA and Japan.
Okay. So you're seeing
don't really describe that.
Okay. So graphically, we see both cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the first one, then not so much because we're seeing, well, will we highlight Japan in that first one, essentially?
I guess we can make it like a Japanese looking person in the rear mirror, but I don't know.
Yeah, it would definitely pose it would definitely be like, oh, like how do we communicate that graphically in the graphic, you know, in a minimalistic way. So they're all good. I would say if the one that is like super obvious on both cultures is definitely your second one, right? So if we had to execute and it's communicating both cultures and the type in the film, and we can get to it simplistically, then I would say that one. I would go with the second one probably.
Cool, me too.
Like I like the first one to a degree, but then the question is like how do we emphasize Japan as well? And I know that a couple of suggestions are good. So guys, they're almost equal, I would say. Like my gut would like to go for first, but the second would definitely be also a possibility too. Let's do the second one.
Okay.
Because if it works on the thumbnail sketch, then it's as both cultures or like the combination of the traveling of the two cultures. Then I would say let's see that in a graphic form. Because if it works on a thumbnail, it should work on a larger scale at the end of the day. So we'll go with that one for the second one. So we will do this one here, which is your second option, and we'll start developing that for next class. Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Very cool. I likes. All right. And I just saw in the email here that we had another one. So Alexis, I know that you submitted one too. So let me go ahead and see if I can bring it in. But I noticed some graphics here in the image. So kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, or if you can voice it in, or we can write it in. But so what are we thinking here in terms of like just concepts? I see like 5 attachments. So let me see.
Yeah, there was 2 other ones.
All right.
Yeah,
so okay, so you got 5 concepts. Is this so are these found images, or are you piecing those together using like a Photoshop, or dropped in Illustrator really quick? It looks like they're screenshots from Illustrator possibly.
Yeah, I just dropped them in real quick on Illustrator just to, I guess, brainstorm what I could be using. So I used the American flag, I used the Japanese flag, and then I just used the Mexican flag as just because my background, just for myself, just to visualize, to see like what kind of concepts I could use to visualize like Chicano with Japan. Or like I like the very first one, even though that was my last one, actually. That one, I just put everything together, and I want to probably put everything inside of the Japanese flag, just to symbolize like the Japanese and then the Chicano culture coming together, and then probably like LA in the bottom.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we have a concept down, right?
Yeah.
So so if that concept is where we want to go with, so then what I'm always concerned about is like working with photos, right? Mm-hmm. Because even though it works on with photos, the goal is always to kind of see what would it look like in terms of like a 2-dimensional sort of flat Illustrator drawing. So do you feel confident that this could be reduced down to more of a actual 2D flat sort of drawing or illustration? Like, can we get to that level with the same concept?
Yeah, I think I could do it. I was just using the images as like reference as of what I could make. Now, I'm not specifically going to use like the face. I use the face because it's a Chicano art, right? So it's an art style to represent Chicano, and then I use the flags just to represent the Chicano history here in the United States, and then Japanese culture coming in.
Okay.
And vice versa. Mm-hmm.
So I would actually see what this would look like if you were to pull it off on a flat image, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, probably you could kind of help the process along by kind of like doodling onto paper. Mm-hmm. So if you know what everything's going to look like, then I would pretty much draw it out, like thumbnail sketch it, so you can say like, okay, now that if I know this is going to work using photos, then what would this look like if I converted it into one circle and drawings. Like, are we going to see the silhouette of the buildings in like a solid image or solid color? What would the face look like, right? Because there's a lot of shading going on in that graphic. So how would that face look like if it were to be minimalist or minimalized, right?
Yeah.
And then the flags, like, you know, the American flag, I can see it. And the Mexican flag, you can see it if we maybe kept the vertical blocks as opposed and reduced that a little bit. But you know, how do we bring it all down onto a 2-dimensional? So that's always going to be the concern, is like, how do we put this in a minimalist sort of graphic and draw it out, see if you could draw it out on paper first. Like, I know the photos are a quick fix, but my biggest concern is like, oh, will this translate as a flat graphic? Because right now we see it as a collage, and it works as a photorealistic collage. Yeah. But we have to filter down, filter it way down to drawing. Okay. Let's see that. And if you have a couple of images and you can shoot it my way between like now and Thursday, that would be great.
I'll make one for sure. I have an idea. I do have an idea. I was just using the images as reference, but I do have an idea on how to make it.
Okay. As long as you're thinking about it and that's part of your process, then I have complete trust. But I'm always thinking about that. Like, okay, like I can see it working in Photoshop, but how do we think about it from an illustrator point of view or perspective, right? So, cool. All right, I like it.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Makes sense. All right. Awesome, guys. So it feels like everyone's thinking is moving in the right direction. It feels like we have an understanding of theme. It feels like we have an understanding of sort of like how everything's gonna coordinate and sort of combine together. So this is great. Practical next steps is that we're gonna leave Thursday for complete execution and building stuff. Okay. So Thursday is just gonna be, hey, 5-10 minutes. Let's touch base, and private rooms for those folks that maybe want to showcase some of their art and share a little bit of their concepts. We'll go into it, but it's going to be mostly lab time on Thursday, so we can build, and design away. Okay, that work for everybody on those? Okay, awesome. So, any last questions or concerns of that sort? Stick around. We'll talk. If you have sketches and you want to take a photo and email them to me, feel free to do that. We always want to make sure that we sign off on a little bit on your thumbnail sketches so that we know what you're thinking. So we'll use a little bit of that time between now and then. So feel free to email me if you have any questions for that too. Okay. All right. So if you do have some thumbnail sketches, then stick around, guys. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the class. So we'll see you on Thursday. We'll have lab time on Thursday if you want to work between now and then on developing your graphic using image trace or pen tooling it. Go for it. And then we'll take a look on Thursday and see if your artwork is echoing the style and the overall graphics look like they're echoing styles in terms of flat color, graphic, orientation, everything. We'll look at the artwork, and then I'll kind of slowly put on my composition and layout hat for like the second half of the hour. Okay. All right. Well done, guys. So then we'll see you on Thursday, and I'll leave a little bit of time after class to look at any more thumbnail sketches and kind of give you guys some feedback. Okay. All right. We will see you then, and we have a good night. All right.
Have a good night, Professor.
You too. See you then, guys.
I'll see you on Thursday, Professor. Bye.
All right. Bye, Laker. We'll see you then.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.